and just plan for this week. But instead now she decides, she like Miss Glamour, go and tell Killian, and then we got all kind of things and just decided to advertise, because I was hoping not to have to be. Another part of it is that I know what I was doing, and then I saw the article in the newspapers on Sunday by Carolyn mentioning the talk, and then mentioning some stupid conference. So Carolyn must be mad, right? So anyway, the rest is history. It is what it is, and I'm here now to do what I originally set out to do in a context that is totally different from the context that I initially imagined. The other bit of context, of course, is that, as happens in Jamaica without warning, the language thing flared up 2 weeks ago, before last Monday with a statement by Twits, and then by the Thursday of the same week there was a Bilingual editorial calling my name, and So, what we will do is at this point open with a letter that I did to the editor of the Gleaner that was never published. I've had Tally translated into Jamaican, and Tally, who works with the GLU in Broadcast Jamaican, which is the news that comes over twice daily in the Jamaican language. Tally Turney will in fact do or present to you the translation of that letter to the Gleaner in the Jamaican.
Welcome everybody. My name is Tally Turney. I'm going to do the letter to the editor for Professor Devonish. Editor, the Gleaner, dear editor. On the editorial on Thursday, October 11, 2018, when I ran it Sweet talk with the as the topic. Ran it Sweet at the Smadi on the other side of Parliament, we talk about education, and in talk about the use of the Jamaican language in the education system. We want to take on the People's National Party, PNP, but whether Mr. Tweet's talk would have been one of the law them what the party would have put forward in the future. We don't read them know what we don't come with. But one little problem there with the argument we want to put out there. With all the politics here, any of the PNP said they want the Jamaican language to use to teach picnic in a school, proper with English, the Jamaica Labour Party might have fight against it. The Jamaican language would have turned orange quick. Me ask nice. But any law about language or language education, nothing talk about in a politics argument. Whether you're labourite or comrade, people they will talk the Jamaican language and you all have somewhere write it all. And them have a say in whether if you use or not use in the school them. If people feel listen to the message of the editorial send out, any agreement with the political party them have amongst them one another to change the law them pan language could have dropped down from. The agreement here they bought from 2001 and it come both from the Joint Select Committee in a Parliament and the Charter of Rights to the Jamaican Constitution. This happened because me and Celia Blake, when we want to get people not forget bad treatment because of which language where them talk, in the Charter of Rights to the Constitution. The committee were having people from the two sides of Parliament set in them 2002 report to the Department of Language, Linguistics and Philosophy, IUE, one place to make up, and it ended up named the Jamaican Language Unit. And right now, Michelle Kennedy, they run it. The unit make to teach people about what go on with the language and to get the proper writing system to everybody out there. Them step they went for happen from time to time for Parliament here about what them do. At the end of the day, the goal I'm going to get people, not forget bad treatment, sake of the language with them chat, in the rights to the Constitution. Not only things not happen from them time they forget Parliament for follow up on them promise. But the talk where they are from Mr. Tweets on the language education law, a show like a movement do. It's the most important talk from a politician for change the law on language since 2002. And one of you know say, Mr. Tweets are one of the members of the Joint Select Committee were made from the two sides of Parliament from 2001, and it will have some whole heap of back and forth, but people get some protection under the law, sake of the language of them chat. But what they want for Jamaica lose? Whole heap of linguistic research, talk from people who know about the topic, and the position where UNESCO take from 1953, all of them have said the same thing. Picnic for learning in school in the language where them chatter them yard, them first language, them mother language. Some research shows that Pitney were learning them first language, think better about themselves, read, talk, and come up with ideas and reason better. Once them pick up them skill, they good in them first language, them able to carry that over with them in our foreign language. On top of that, Pitney will get the chance for learning them first language in a school, able to learn second and foreign language quicker. And for add to that, them able to use the second and foreign language them better than the Pitney them when they get the chance for learning them first language. The research shows that Pitney were learning them second language or one foreign language, can't read so good, them not able to talk out things or come up with ideas so good. On top of that, them not able to catch on them subject them so good, because them are learning in one language where them don't know nothing about. The research across the world has shown that for Jamaica, teaching Pitney in English and Jamaican would have turn up the test result them in how Pitney talk out things, reason out things, and come up with ideas. At them they sitting there, the primary exit profile PEP, I look hard pan. Your headline PEP in the universe of Potter, talk about what one nice. This is how the smarty them on the other side of Parliament for education and argue so the Jamaican language for use in the school them proper. May I put it out there, so I want everybody to know about and talk about love and education, especially about language in a school. And as so comes the Department of Language, Linguistics and Philosophy, I put out one talk with me in there about one official language law for Jamaica. And it got talk about the Jamaican language I use in a school. You and the people then were working in a newspaper to cover the event. It got gone at the Neville Hall Lecture Theatre at the UA Mona campus. It got gone from 2:30 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon from Thursday, October 25, 2018. It got put on to celebrate International Creole Day. When time we are celebrating that day, we are give everybody in a Jamaica the chance to see we have got the Jamaican language to use with English all about in a Jamaica and in every setting. People in a Jamaica can get service in a government place in a them own language and education in a that too, without them get bad treatment and whether they chat or understand English. This is not a politics thing. This is one Jamaican thing where everybody in the country for in. The Jamaican language no orange nor green. When time you look on the colors them, in between orange and green they have yellow, the color gold. Jamaican people love them language like a one gold badge where them show say them are Jamaican. Me I done that letter here, I asked for something. For International Creole Day, on October 28, 2018, people for wear the color of the national language with the national color gold. Put on something with a gold on it for sure say we are back the language and it be used in a school. Put on the color for sure say you love your national language, Jamaican. Hubert Devonish, Department of Language, Linguistics and Philosophy, Mona Campus, October 18, 2018.
That was why I thought I was going to be doing this afternoon. All right, let me see none of this. Right, okay, good. So, the first thing is that we got to understand how this advocacy thing works. Once upon a time, it was the earliest people like myself, the linguists and so on, felt that their role had to be to correct misinformation. You've been hearing about it early in the day. You know, people talking foolishness about what have structure, what don't have structure, what can do and what can't do, and what is a language and what is not. And so, a colleague, retired colleague of mine, Pauline Christie, was very active in the 70s and 80s, writing letters to the press, clarifying misinformation. People were talking all kinds of strange things about language and Creole and where it came from, where it didn't come from, and so on. And she took it upon herself as a public intellectual to write letters to the press from time to time. After a while, I know she told me she get fed up because she write the same thing over and over again, and like it make no difference to come back with it again. But that was a period of limited, very restricted media. It was probably just Blina, Daily News, yes you had, it was JBC, RJR, very limited radio and so on, and therefore not a lot of media in which to carry out the fight. Pauline got fed up, and I know she said to me that she never done. And what she did was, in fact, to compile all of the questions that had been asked and all of the letters of clarification. And in 2003, she published a book called Language in Jamaica, which kind of like deal with it and done. I don't think she talked about it since, but her attitude was, she said all she had to say, she put it in a book, take it, go on with it, all right? But that represents what I might call the defensive part of what the public intellectual, who is a linguist, does. Clarify, inform, try to deal with people and kind of get them, reason with them kind of thing. I came along and we did some of that, but I kind of had a more ignorant streak, which kind of said, attack them. Because this wasn't just lack of information, this was deliberate ignorance, and this was a support for a system that benefited certain people. And therefore, don't let me pretend that it's just that you don't know, because I tell you the same thing over and over and over again, and you're still talking the same stupidness. All right. So that was the spirit of language and liberation. That was the attack phase. That you, whoever that you is, have a certain attitude or approach to language because it suits you, it suits the system that benefits you, and you have a vested interest in the status quo, and therefore you need to be attacked and exposed accordingly. So that's the attack mode. And then, of course, the other bit, right, which is, of course, even in attacking, you are talking about what they want you to talk about, and kind of say that what you're talking about is deliberate and wicked and part of an approach that, in fact, supports the status quo. But then, I'm still talking about what you want me to talk about. And so, I would say certainly by 2001, we moved to a different phase, which is set the agenda. You put out, or we put out, positions that we think are important about language, let them cuss. Let them attack you and say you're a damn fool, and the people up at the university and so on. So that particular set the agenda stage arguably didn't necessarily start with me. It would have started with Carolyn writing in The Observer in about, I think, 1992, one or thereabouts, right? So we have that. Well, when was it, Carolyn? It was 93, okay? And then, of course, she got all the licks, which is kind of cool, because Carolyn was, in a sense, the public hate figure, talking this pattern, writing this pattern thing in the newspapers and so on. But from the academic point of view, from my perspective as well, we had to do what we had to do. And I think the most effective response was when we got the opening, and again, this is really Trevor Munro was doing at the time that he was an independent senator in the parliament, that they got the language rights, or he invited me to enter the discussion about the Charter of Rights to the Jamaican Constitution, to do a presentation to the Joint Select Committee of Parliament. And that gave us our first in to go at them by putting an agenda item on. And so there were a series of newspaper articles about that, and it then, from there on, they started to talk about what we wanted them to talk about. So the new situation where you will get the various elements in newspapers attacking and so on, and talking about the conspiracy up at the university by educated people like Devonish and Hubert, who speak several languages and who want to deprive poor black people of the right to speak English and so on. That's okay, because they are talking about what we are having a conversation about. We are determining the agenda. And this particular presentation is intended to annoy them even further. Because we are setting the agenda by saying we have done all the work and we're kind of ready for a bilingual official language policy. And this is the beginning of a discussion on what that policy would look like. Now, as I did it, or did something, this was essentially a concept paper. Now, I should mention that the origins of this were lay in the 2016 Society for Caribbean Linguistics Conference at Mona, because we contrived to get the officers of the Ministry of Education, including the Chief Education Officer, into a room around lunch, at which a lot of distinguished linguists like Ian and the serious people, I won't say heavyweights, but the serious people in linguistics, kind of from Haiti and wherever, simply said to her, it is accepted knowledge within the discipline amongst people who know about this thing, that education in a child's native language is critical for the child, all right, critical for the psyche and everything. It so happens it also is very good for them learning a second language like English, and then we even better. But that's not the justification, but it is one of the factors. And I think under some pressure, and Dr. Grace McLean, said to us that she would invite us to present a concept paper on the question of a language policy for Jamaica to the Ministry of Education. At the time, I didn't know what my concept paper was. Not a clue. It's some fancy. That was it. Later on, I realized that a concept paper within the language and of the bureaucracy is a precursor to a policy. So you get a concept paper first, and then from that concept paper, you get a policy. I kind of said, well, you know, maybe, yeah, but doing, I just felt that doing a concept paper on bilingual education policy for the Ministry of Education was really an invitation to send out a document which would go into 530, right? And I thought that in the end, what we really needed to do was to have a public debate about language policy generally, because language education policy cannot exist outside of language policy generally. And that therefore this had to be about language policy, a national official language policy within which language education policy would be a part. That's one. And that secondly, we were going to have to do it in a public forum, or public fora, I should say, over a period of time during which people can contribute, discuss, and so on. So that at a point where there's some kind of final consensus on this thing, even if a portion of it goes to the Ministry of Education, it's going to the Ministry of Education in a context where this is a public document with public support behind it and with all of the pressure necessary to get them to move. Because we know that the administrative elite and the political elite will only move when they get pressure from outside. So, so we are in the third phase where we are trying to set the agenda, and the agenda is in the form of an official bilingual language policy and getting it implemented. Right. Now, so what happens is that normally the existing status quo, there is no national official language policy in the form of a piece of paper that I can find in place. And that is because systems that are in place don't need to codify their rules. Everybody knows that. You know where you go to school, learn English, you go to the school book in English, you go to the courts, they operate in English. Nobody has to tell you that because you grew up, born, and the whole system works on that. Where typically you get, and I think even from my lawyer friends and so on, you have the common law, and then when you want to do something very specific, you pass legislation. That's when, in a sense, you are deviating from custom and practice. Now, what's happening is this is definite deviation from custom and practice, and therefore we're going to need something in writing. We're going to need documents that can be referred to. We're going to need very explicit rules that say what is to be done. And so this is what, in this discussion, this is what we're talking about, right? So we need a new linguistic order that is, that kind of spells things out. Now, the question of what the hell is official? Well, the trick that we, in a sense, I've kind of learned from Celia quite a bit. Celia Blake, who was my legal consultant on language matters and my sidekick when always willing from the time she used to work in the media to get into mischief of various sorts, irritating the linguistic establishment. So, the following on the kinds of talks, conversations, and so on, I realized that in something like this, you need to hook it on something. And I think the easiest document to hook it on is the Charter of Rights to the Jamaican Constitution, the very one that we've been campaigning for 15 years or more to have altered to include freedom from discrimination on the ground of language. But I'll get to that in a bit. The fact is that the Charter of Rights covers generally all entities that are controlled by the Jamaican state, and the government, whether it be controlled partly, whatever it is, but essentially under the control of the state. And in addition, there's an addition, public utilities and monopolies, right, such as water, the utilities in the area of water, telecommunications, electricity, whether privately or publicly owned, because I think that thinking there being that when you get, even if it were privately owned, your rights can be violated by a very large entity, and then therefore that too, or those entities have to come under control, under the umbrella, as it were, of the Charter of Rights. So we're saying, if the plank of a new bilingual language policy has to be based, or the basis for it is in fact the Charter of Rights and the need to in fact introduce freedom from discrimination on the ground of language as the, in a sense, philosophical basis for a bilingual education policy, or a bilingual language policy. So it's not just bilingual for the sake of being bilingual, it's bilingual because it is a mode or a means of achieving freedom from discrimination on the ground of language, and it will cover all of the entities that are covered by the Charter of Rights. Okay? Now, next question is, because we're defining the basic terms. If you're going to have a policy, you have to know the policies about what. So the next thing is about language, right? Now, you might say, we always ask as linguists, is patois a language? Well, the real linguist answer is a language if you think it is a language, right? Because there's the key thing is this, that most would say, well, it is a language or a different language if you can't understand the other form of speech. But anybody knows that understanding is, of course, a continuum, that I find very great difficulty understanding people who speak even standard English, but who are Scottish. For example, their vowels, oo and oo, they will say good for good and so on and so forth, right? Kind of throws me, it takes me a long time to get accustomed to them, right? So, doesn't mean they speak a different language, but it just depends on what you want to view. But the key thing is this, to demonstrate the point. I've stood up and seen speakers of Spanish, monolingual speakers of Spanish, speaking to monolingual speakers of Portuguese, and talking, they're communicating. Not perfectly, but like 90%. Yet they are speaking different languages according to what the book said. Spanish and Portuguese are two different languages. I'm told as well that now Norwegians and Swedes converse quite easily in their respective languages and understand each other. At the same time, however, I know that in the case of Putonghua, the form of speech that is marketed as Mandarin, right? Speakers say, for example, of Cantonese, they do not understand each other. In fact, a Chinese linguist who I asked about how different is Putonghua from Cantonese, and he says about the difference between English and German. Yet, they are dialects of the same language as viewed by the Chinese and the world. Okay, so clearly, whether two forms of speech belong to separate languages or belong to the same language is really essentially about the politics and how people see things. So, is Jamaican a dialect of English or is it a separate language? Well, it's for you to decide. Now, well, you did decide, because the Language Attitude Survey of 2005 showed that when posed with the question, is Jamaican a language? The answer was 80% said yes. So we know that already. Now, what I'm doing is, what we're trying to do is to build this policy based on what or assumptions, facts that information we do have, okay? And I should mention that when the studies, whenever I refer to language aptitude survey, it was replicated by KDR, who was their chief organizing this stuff. About 2 or 3 times they have replicated the survey in the last 5 years, and we keep coming up with exactly the same figures as for 2005, so it's not a fluke, okay? Right, so we know that you, the speakers of Jamaica, have decided that question already, right? Good, argument done, okay? Now, so the question really would be, what would be the listed languages we might want to cover under an official language policy? And obviously, there's English, so all the varieties. Now, I know that people are purists and will say that certain things are English, certain things are not. Well, when I do some informal studies of even master's students in English language, and ask them the question, which of the 2 forms would you consider correct? More than 1 book or more than 1 book? By the way, inside here, let me see the hands of people who will say more than 1 book is the okay thing, right? Okay, all right, and then let me see the hands of people who will say more than 1 book. All right, let me try next one. I want one of, hold on. Okay. One of the book. Is that okay for you? No, simply aim at backing down the people that it's quite anything. Right. All right. Let me try a different one again. Now, if I say to you, right, I'm going to give you a sentence, and you're going to tell me, and I'm going to ask you a question. There will be a few showers this afternoon. Okay, is that a sign that you should walk with your umbrella or not? So there will be a few showers this afternoon. Let me see the hands who will walk with an umbrella. And let me see the hands of the people who will not walk with the umbrella. Right? Okay. All right. So for many Jamaicans, there is no distinction between the 2. And in fact, it actually means, so a few, which in white people English means some. For most of the Jamaicans who are, obviously this is a highly educated and very sophisticated English, or I suspect it's kind of enough for people there, right? So sorry, forgive me, not people above the sorry. Right? But then let's put it this way, for the younger people, and if you check those examples that I've given you in the Gleaner and the Observer, and you will see that for the older people who have the kind of more traditional interpretations of these, you will find that more often than not, the supposedly wrong one is the one appearing in the newspaper. Okay? Right. So there's no consensus on what is good English in Jamaica. That's what this is about. And therefore, all we're doing is walking south and saying, look, you see for the varieties of English, so long as one of them outside people can say, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, like pass. Because there's no, so contrary to what the folks say, oh, they have different, in citizenship, they have a totally different kind of background. All languages have variation. And if this total difference was such a big deal, there would be no English, even within England, because the dialect differences across England are much greater than the dialect differences are across Jamaica, for understandable reasons. A much bigger blasted place. Yeah. And they have been living in these disparate places separately for much longer. So naturally the dialect differences are vastly different, but complicated by the influx of Viking, Norwegian influence in areas around New York and the center, which create even more diversity. So the main point is, whatever area of grayness and unsureness about, so the shout is out there. There's no standard form of Patois, there's no standard form of English. All kind of people talk all kind of different English. In Jamaica here, where there are differences among educated people, differences in interpretation of some very simple English constructions and so on. But that's not good. Now so that covers English and covers. So Jamaican similarly is a construct. Just once you decide that these things kind of more or less you identify, you could say that people in the West talk a different language from people in the East if you want. And in some countries or situations, that degree of language difference is enough to have wars, civil wars. That happens with Serbia and Croatia, where essentially the difference between Serbian and Croatian is a difference between how you write the language, not what you say. Okay? Or Indian Urdu is another example. So that said, so we are saying really that that these things are constructs, and that they already we know as English we'll work with a thing that said roughly English, Jamaican. Now Jamaican Sign Language important because the deaf or the deaf community is a linguistic minority, and any policy which is talking about freedom from discrimination on the ground of language needs, in fact, to take account of the rights of linguistic minorities. The signing community is one of them. Now you have what we call heritage languages. There's Old Time Patois, and that it was this morning we had a presentation on Old Time Patois. It's called Maroon Spirit language, but it's an old-fashioned form of Jamaican Creole used in the Maroon communities historically, but it's kind of more or less on its way out in terms of being spoken, but it's a heritage language. It's part of the cultural heritage of the country. Similarly, Comanche, and similarly Kikongo for the community. And country sign, because there's an indigenous country sign used in parts of St. Elizabeth amongst the deaf there, and it's an indigenous, it's not Jamaican Sign Language, which is a version of American Sign Language, but a locally developed system, which is kind of on its way out under pressure from Jamaican Sign Language. Okay, cool. Right. Now the question is, where is it covered? Well, language policy, some countries actually try to legislate what language people use in their bedroom and in their homes. That's what we're talking about. Because this is the focus is rights, freedom from discrimination. That therefore, any language policy which is based on that is going to be focused on the state, its organs and its relationship with citizens and people living within the borders of the country, right? So, moving swiftly on, right? Now, the scope would be, of course, speech, as well as sign language writing, because, language occurs in various forms. So, you've got people, these agencies, through their offices, talk to people, people talk back to them, they write to people, people write back to them, right? And then, of course, there's also the language used inside the organization itself, record keeping and so on and so forth. And there's, of course, public signs, all of that. Now, there's a constitution. So what are the principles governing the policy? Because you have to be guided by something, right? Because you have to be saying, hey, look, we are, these are the underlying, a policy says do X, Y, and Z. Why are you doing it? And when in fact should you do it, and then should you not do it, and when some reasonable or reasonable, you have these underlying principles that need to be addressed, right? So the constitutional reform did specifically Charter of Rights. And then there's secondly, and this is the other thing, that in 2011, there was a conference held here in Jamaica on the campus on the question of a charter of rights to the, language rights, a charter on language rights in the Creole-speaking Caribbean, right? And that's charter on language rights in the Creole-speaking Caribbean. Now, that, in a way, identifies in fine detail all the rights that people should have, and as well all the treaties that the Caribbean governments have signed that have implications for language. So it looks at what happens within the family, child care, health, etc., etc. So you've got already a charter that deals with the rights issue. Again, so it's giving a philosophical base to a language policy. And then, of course, there's the question of what you need for economic production, marketing, and branding, because, of course, the branding part of it already, the cultural product of Jamaica, which generates hundreds of millions of US dollars every year. Of course, that cultural product is marketed and branded using the Jamaican language, right? In fact, the part of what I didn't get a chance to do for this presentation was to calculate on an annual basis how much Jamaican language brings in the area of popular music. If you assume that once we get the value in any year for returns on music, and we recognize that hardly any Jamaican music is instrumental, it's awesome. It therefore means that half of whatever comes in there is language. And we have, therefore, the language generating value, even in a situation where it's not supported by the education system. It's much more if we did have that support. Okay, cool. Now, then, of course, there's a question of public demand. The public demand is there. Why? Because the language attitude survey actually asks people the question, what do you, they ask people questions in relation to what kind of official language policy they want. And 70% of them approximately claim that they wanted bilingual official language policies. So the public are way ahead of the policymakers and the bureaucrats, but then it's understandable. The other thing that we found in language attitude survey is that the attitudes amongst the young, right, were way in advance. So the older up you went, the more hostile the attitudes became, or the more negative they were. So language policy will proceed one finger at a time, but it will. Okay, so that was those are the results, right? So we have the public support. We have, so again, contrary to what we think, in other words, Daniel Spates can represent the Jamaican. Daniel Spates can write, take over the whole and mean a little page. That's true. So what? In fact, the other part of it is that the loud and the headlines and the animosity and the hostility, that only comes from people who are losing the argument. Because if what we were talking about was a bag of stupidness, they wouldn't waste time to write an article, right? So when you see these articles coming out, and so on, it means you're winning the argument. One of my younger colleagues who is in Fiji right now, who told me that she, well, in fact, she's one of the people working with her research. She said, well, she hadn't done as much before last as she could have, because she got involved again in the argument here about you know, the Twitter and the confusion and so on about language attitudes and so on and so forth. And so I asked her, she was quarreling and said, these damn stupid people and so on. I said, hey, in the end, how many was for language policy change and how many against? She said the majority were for. I said, well, we were in, so relax. You know, just keep arguing. Okay, so the point is that I've been here 40 years and I know how the debate has swung. If I call a talk like this 40 years ago, if 10 people were there in this room, right? So, you know, because it was people like me who were kind of crazy, very much on the fringes, and people would listen to you and say, yeah, it's a good idea, but, and then they'll move on. Okay, so the point would be, though, that the policy will have to list what people are entitled to. And the point is that entitlement I'm suggesting would be an entitlement to services in written and spoken media, in both languages on demand. So the people who said that they try to joke out English and put pathway instead, and you know I know English and so on. Well, the reality is that a considerable amount of resources, a number of resources, are invested in the records that we have, which are in English. Therefore, we're going to run all the things in English. That would make no sense. And would you not want people to have access to this information? And so, of course, you would. So, but you're recognizing that there are two widely used languages in the country, and for people who are going to access the services of the state, they should do so in a language that they prefer. After all, it's them paying the taxes for them civil servants. So who the hell is them civil servants dictating to you what language you're supposed to talk to them? No matter what. It's the same stupidness with the clothes that they tell you must go in hospital wearing a certain kind of clothes and they'll show this. You paying them. But anyway, that's another story. It's the same principle, which is that we have rights. And that unfortunately, this post-colonial state that we have has decided that they actually control us. But that's another story. Now, the other thing, in the discussion about language, the education part of it, they talk about teach pattern. Right, but pure foolishness. The people don't know what they're saying. Right. Of course, but those English children go to school and learn English. Yeah. Okay, so what we've got to do is to get beyond the teach patois and learn patois to what it is that languages do in a formal education system. And they function, just if you focus on English, for that matter, right now, since we know about it, it's a subject in school. So there's a class called English. There is a subject. You go and do English, English A at CXC, but the is a subject, right? Go. But then the teacher also gets up in the class and talks to the children, and they pretend that the children talk back to them in English. Okay? Okay? And then, so that's the medium of instruction, right? Which is English. Then it's a medium of written communication. The teacher will write on the board in English, the textbooks are written in English, and the children, unless told otherwise, are expected to write their answers in English. So there's a writing part. And then most fundamentally, English is the only language that children ever, when they acquire literacy, it's a language of literacy, when you learn ABC, if apple, B for bat, and so on. You learn English words which you write in English, and eventually all your written skills are developed in English. So those are 4 separate functions. And therefore any claim for both languages to be used would cover all 4 functions. So rather than getting that thing, but teach part 1, teach this and teach that, all we're saying is that these 4 functions should operate side by side in both languages. Right. Now, okay. The real thing is that, because what I'm trying to do is, this is really just giving you a broad sense of the scope of what a language education policy would do as part of a bilingual policy. I'm just checking the time now to see what, yeah, I gotta wrap up now because I gotta get some time for think and so on. Right? Because Joseph tell me I got to 4 o'clock, right? So, all right, good. Then I can do the thing now. The question is how to do it. Because of course the big bogey is, oh, we can't afford it. So we take enough money and da 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 da. Now, there are. It's true. If you took a bureaucratic approach to trying to introduce bilingual official and bilingual language education policy, you set up a huge office with translators and a whole set of huge salaries, and you start to multiply. No, it would still be money worth spent, or well spent, or worth spending. But there are simpler ways to do it. When you go through a process of providing access by needing, for a start, to translate forms to train public officials, to translate public signs, to develop audio material in 2 languages, and generally to make all public information and public content. You have to retrain your police force to take statements in both languages. You know, the court people court translators, interpreters, and so on. There's a huge amount that needs to be there. Glossaries, technical glossaries for everything from engineering, electrical engineering to literature for that matter. Because this has got to be right across both languages functioning in exactly the same way. It is going to be something that is a once in the lifetime of the nation experience. It's not going to happen again. Once it's done, it's done. And it is obvious that it is a learning experience or potentially a learning experience for the young. The smartest way to deal with everything is to integrate it into the education system, and more specifically the higher education system. That in fact, if you work a system in which you have majors in the higher education institution that would have a component of what we might call dual language linguistics, which is really all this thing about linguistics, but the linguistics of the relationship between English and Jamaican and how to deal with all these issues and so on. That would be a linguistics course. And then let us say you're a specialist in chemistry. It then means that within a combined degree like that, and a deliberate injection of a couple of courses that require you to produce glossaries of chemistry in Jamaican and that kind of thing, or do translations of latest research on chemistry and so on into the language. That way, you get a situation where you generate a whole mass of literature, training materials, etc., in the 2 languages for cheap. Because even if you pay the students, you're paying the students, hourly rates, student rates, which is barely for them to live. And that was a model we used for the bilingual education project, which got implemented, and we translated the textbooks for up to 4 years of primary school, using some of the translators that they are, they could issue you and take an RD I see somewhere about. So many of the people who were involved in the translation and the production of glossaries and technical terminology and so on, and the teaching materials for the bilingual education are here right now, having funded a portion of their first degree, having become graduate students. Some already have PhDs, some getting them and so on. All by simply turning the whole process of making the society more just into a learning opportunity, which then ends up with everybody benefiting and in fact getting around the problems that the cost of all, right? So it's a case of what we call in Ghana getting 2 sweet over 1 cake, right? So the sugar cane, but they get 2 sweet, not 1, right? Jamaica stuff, well, in English it's always killing 2 birds with 1 stone, but that's a very negative kind of thing. No man, no man, 2 sweet over 1 cake, never. Okay? Right. And so this will be, so that's in terms of the handling, the implementation and so on. Now, what I do have, what I did was to present the headlines of the policy, basically how it would work and so on. I will work with my colleagues to mount the first draft of a blog, right? And we will circulate to the conference people by tomorrow, the link and so on. Now, here's the plan. And that's just a rough mock-up of the beginning of a policy and the principles and so on. We want to have a general public debate about it and so on. With a view, I think, if I'm correct, sometime in February is International Mother Tongue Day. And in a sense, if we could use the time between now and then, have a discussion, then we can have an event on International Mother Tongue Day where we say, all right, we got it now, this is what it looks like, this is the consensus. We'll follow the same principle that we followed in the case of the Charter on Language Rights in the Creole-speaking Caribbean, where we circulated it amongst the linguists, but we're trying to get as well the public involved in a discourse of it. At the end of it, we're going to put it out there, make a big noise about it, and make them quarrel again. Okay? But the point is that what this represents is us setting the agenda, pushing the agenda, and every time, at least now, people, after 2004, nobody can say that you cannot, you don't hear the argument that you can't teach children empathy anymore, because it's already. Okay? They say they don't want it because they don't like it, and this and that and the other. But the point is that by with every step, providing options and alternatives and moving the boundaries forward, we are progressively winning the argument. Thank you very much.
And because of time, we're going to open up for about, since it's Professor Devonish, 4 questions rather than 3. Okay, so we have one here and somebody in the black shirt, and then we look around. 1, 2, 3. Right, so you need to go to the mic. 4 persons. Okay, you may begin.
Thanks much, Prof. Devonish. In, I think, 2005 or 2006, the foreign language teachers or educators across the country came together to make some suggestions to the Ministry of Education in regard to the amendment of the draft policy. I think it was in 2001. We gave the former Minister of Education, Maximilian Wilson, the recommendations in regard to inclusion of Spanish, French, and other ethnic-based languages for the policy. We didn't hear anything at all. In 2013, I think I spoke with Mrs. Wilson, who said that the thing was taken to cabinet, but it was rejected because of the inclusion of Jamaican Creole at the time. The question now, is there any scope, you think, for us to broaden the discussion, take it away from Creole versus or Creole and English to Creole, English, and another language? So first language, second language, and a foreign language. So what would that add to the discussion?
Well, obviously, it will add. We keep getting various prime ministers and ministers of education jumping up with the Spanish thing and so on and so forth. But here's where we kick them off. Linguists have a kind of terminology. First language for us means the first language you learn. Second language you learn, etc., third language, and so on. For the average non-linguist, first means highest in status. Second in status. So I think we should, first of all, let me back away from this first language and second language thing because it creates too much confusion, right? So what we'll be saying is that obviously for some people in Jamaica, English is their mother tongue. For the vast majority, Jamaican is their mother tongue. To survive in Jamaica, it is useful to be bilingual. So that, for a start, let me make one point. In the bilingual proposals, is somehow the people, the idea that poor black people children must be taught bilingually so they can learn English, but the English-speaking children don't need to learn Jamaican, which is of course crap. Survive in Jamaica, you have to be bilingual and work. But when you create a bilingual school, it is for everybody, not for the children of the poor. Okay?
Here, here.
And then the question is, once we understand that, it's not about the first, whatever it is, you've got the two, that then the question of how you handle foreign languages, the problem I think we have is that the understanding of what language learning is poor, because all the idiots we're talking about declaring Spanish the official second language, they can't have one word of a foreign language. Because anybody who has tried to learn a foreign language knows that learning and speaking and functioning a foreign language effectively is a lifelong journey. Yeah. It don't end with a 3-credit course. So when we talk about everybody will be able to speak Spanish and do right? So the point is that once we shift the discussion away from this language and we're talking about a process of language use and language learning would involve English, Jamaican, and the foreign language, but always talking more in terms of a process and exposure and specific kinds of competence at a particular point, we may be able to get a more intelligent discussion. So the bilingual approach plus foreign languages, properly phrased, avoiding some of the divisive terminology like first and second language, we may get somewhere. Right? So we can talk about it a bit more.
Sir. The person is at the mic, so we'll go one side, and then you can come to the mic. Yes.
Thank you. Professor Devonish, as a Jamaican, I really want to say thank you for the dedicated work that you have put in Jamaica. Now, recently, I don't know what involvement you had in the development of the PEP curriculum. None. Okay, so recently I went to pick up my niece from school. She's at a prominent prep school preparing for PEP. And they were doing an exercise where the teacher was saying something in English, and the children are at the board writing, and I was trying to figure out what were they doing, and then I realized she was speaking English and expecting them to write Jamaican on the board. And they were really just, I mean, grammatic rules, everything were, you know, really not there. So I spoke with her afterwards and discovered that there was no grammar book she was using, there were no rules that she was using, but this was an expectation that the children should be able to switch from the one language to the other. So because I've been doing some work with the language, I offered to help come in and as a resource person to help them, because of course spelling system, everything, nothing is there for them to use, but there's this expectation. And so I went online to find the curriculum. And my heart, because I was so excited that finally we were validating our language at this level, and you know, we're going somewhere finally. And as I read the curriculum, what I saw in the undertones was not an attempt to bring equality, but to ensure that the Patois-speaking children can speak English. Now they have a problem because these children in this prominent prep school do not know the Patois. So I just wanted to find out if there was any consultation with your department in including this, and I'm really disappointed to find out, you know, that there isn't. But let us just hope for the future. And then I was also wondering, sir, here's a question. A lot of our schools were started by churches. And now, and I see Bertram, who led the project to translate the New Testament into the Jamaican language, is here. And I was just wondering if there hasn't been more collaboration with the churches in building this policy, this education policy, based on the fact that we have this document in the Jamaican language.
Right. I think that probably, given the content of the PEP and so on, and I've kind of done some work on it, and there's another one coming out, which is the test that is now in 2021, which is getting more PEP-like than PEP, and shows some kind of trouble. But just simply to say that part of what I didn't do in the policy was in the presentation was to indicate that in terms of what a bilingual official policy is going to look like, it will say something like, the Jamaican language is the language that unites all Jamaicans, or presumed to be so, right? English, right, is the language which Jamaicans speak to people who are not Jamaican, right? This generally, this therefore represents the importance, the relative importance of the two languages. The one is a language for internal communication. Now you might say, well, yeah, but 20% of the population don't talk Jamaican. Yeah, so what? The other 80% who right now are disenfranchised, nobody ever came with them, right? So what we are really saying is it's far easier for a non-Jamaican child to learn Jamaican in Jamaica because of this kind of environment and so on than for a non-English speaker to learn it. So you're really moving to a majoritarian as opposed to a minoritarian approach to language policy by saying, look, ultimately, because I think one of the bit of the wording is that says that it is the language that distinguishes Jamaicans from all others, one. And secondly, it is the language that Jamaicans use essentially to bind them together. English is essentially the language of external communication. They are both important, and therefore we need a policy that enshrines both of them as part of the official languages. Right.
Okay, thank you.
So with regards to mother tongue language education, we in a research in 1998, which was done by Collier and Thomas and Collier, and it shows that with a project like this, I'm not sure in terms of the percentile or the literacy rate, or what percentile the literacy rate has moved with bilingual education. However, when UNESCO did research and Collier did research in 1998, it guarantees at least a 33% movement in terms of literacy rate. What we found out is that most of the developed countries and developing countries who are African-based, which is Creole, basically in terms of the Caribbean and so on, we find out that most of these students are disproportionately affected because of the mother tongue. So what we are asking now, sir, is this. If the mother tongue is going to push the percentile literacy rate, that which we are at 87%, and 80 Jamaica, 80 Jamaica is 87%. I believe in my own finite knowledge that yes, the bilingual education project will push the literacy rate to that percentile, that level, up to a national standard because of the fact that most African countries fall below the Human Development Index in terms of the literacy. So what I'm trying to say now is that, sir, the cost to implement a mother tongue language cannot be so humongous than the high attrition rate in terms of what we're experiencing in the university. The second thing what we're experiencing is the language learning in terms of the children learning. There's a particular difficulty. So if that is so high right now, I don't see our mother tongue language implementation and language policy funding could be that much expensive, and more importantly, we are in technology now, so we can write our algorithm for the corpus and all of these things.
Yeah, just a quick comment to say, yes, that when everybody talks about how much more money it's going to cost, they forget how much you're going to save, right? Which has to be discovered. Anyway, yes.
Yeah. Right. Sir, I'm quite fascinated by this recommendation about the dual language and linguistics. I'm wondering though, because I know that you're expecting backlash that you will get, I'm wondering if you have thought about some of the possible opposing arguments that may come, and what is your response to them?
Well, I would say, we've heard it already, that Patagonia rules, etc., right?
No, sir. As it relates specifically to your recommendation, this whole plan for integration at higher education level, and that aspect.
I don't know. I mean, I would say my former colleagues thing and say, I don't imagine that there's anything that, once educationally you've got a coherent set of courses that make sense and achieve educational objectives in a situation where you have got where you are addressing national concerns. Who to tell we if we as professionals decided it works and the thing is coherent, then it will go. I think my understanding of the institution that I have worked with for a while is that if you make your case and it is coherent, it makes sense, it fits in, and the students are learning, then they'll approve it. Now, the real challenge is getting the external people to make the relevant decisions so that a program such as the one I develop, or I am proposing, I'm suggesting we develop, that to make it work. But in terms of, we already have a system of double majors. People already do linguistics and language education. So in other words, the concept that you can combine linguistics with other disciplines and therefore find ways of applying our insights and concerns to those disciplines and vice versa is already there. So there's no real big, the labeling and the packaging and so on is something we can debate and discuss as an institution.
Just wanted to hear it.
Sir, you spoke of in your presentation languages that you wish to be covered by the Charter of Rights. Spoke about some heritage languages, sign language and so on. I wonder, did you consider the socially unacceptable Jamaica expletives? Do you think it would be important, appropriate?
No, that's not language in the sense we're talking about overall linguistic system. What you're talking about is a set of taboo words that have certain penalties associated with them. Well, I have thought of it, but let me take seriously, I have never thought of language rights in terms of freedom, and even when we talk about freedom from discrimination or grounds of language, I've never thought of it in relation to the freedom. So, my comment would be just simply that all languages, of course, have taboo words that create problems of something. Because actually, the taboo words are covered under the Public Order Act. In other words, when you use these words, you endanger public order. Right? So the challenge is going to be. I haven't thought about it. Let me hear it.
Yeah, I think you're talking about it, but just to add something, you spoke of, I understand the idea of them being taboo words and being a part of public art. But, you know, I noticed, you know, in my normal going out and coming that, you know, we talk about poor people and, you know, what affects poor people disproportionately. I noticed that the poor tend to use these so-called taboo words and more casually and with less.
Right, I don't say it's a very, my comment is, right, but my comment really is, I think it's a serious point.
Thank you.
It's worth thinking about, discussing, and trying to see how we fit it in, because we are talking about freedom from discrimination in language, freedom of expression, etc. How do we deal with it? I think now that we've raised it, I don't think we can get away from discussing it. But I had never thought of it before.
But you're not serious?
No, I'm not studying.
Very getting rich, but I won't comment. My role is not to comment. So, any more questions? Yes. The mics are. So you can line up.
Yes, professional. Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. All right. So I guess my question is, you know what I do.
Yes, I do.
And you know that we have a quorum of Peace Corps volunteers. I'm going to say it now. So we have a quorum of Peace Corps volunteers who are being taught Jamaican and who are out there in our society advocating for the use of the language in their schools, etc. How much of this can we use to our advantage in advocating for policy and in advocating for teachers to be more appreciative and to embrace more of what we do? Because right now we have, for example, Peace Corps volunteers. Recently one sent me a picture with her classroom decked out with the Cassidy alphabet, and she was teaching her students, based on what she was taught by the Peace Corps, how to code switch and how to appreciate their language, but also as a literacy specialist, how to transfer the knowledge they know into their own language. And I feel like sometimes we warm up a lot faster to foreigners and what they have to say. And so sometimes I hear them sending these success stories, you know, our teachers have allowed us to use Cassidy in the classroom, all these things. Now, I mean, it's a few schools, a few volunteers, but how much of this can we use in this type of advocacy in a more organized and intentional way to really, you know, advocate for our language? So yes, I'm being asked to explain what we do. So Peace Corps volunteers, so Peace Corps is an organization that is an agency of the U.S. Embassy, and we have volunteers here who work in two sectors, literacy and environment. And so most of our volunteers work with schools, but their main objective is to teach literacy. That's their main objective. And when they come here, we teach them Jamaican, because we believe that if they're going to live here and they will live here for 2 years, that they have to be able to identify with and speak to Jamaicans in their mother tongue. And many of the linguists in here have worked with Peace Corps and have really helped to build the program that we have now. And what we find is the more advanced the program gets, is the more the volunteers want to bring Jamaican flow into their classroom. So how could we maximize on this?
Well, I suppose we need to meet. Right? Yeah, but I mean, answer is obviously we need to meet, we need to talk, we need to figure out how to you, because this is a case where you're getting feedback from outside and this thing is wonderful. It's the equivalent of Obama coming and saying, what, right? And they feel nice because Obama said. So if we can have some of the Obama effect in an organized way, why not? So something for us to talk about.
Very much in favor of a bilingual education system, of course, with English and Creole. But I fear that, you know, promoting and instituting a bilingual system will lead to a monolingual system, as I have seen based on a little research on the situation in Haiti, because I know for a fact that despite the fact that the country is a bilingual country officially, you know, in the education system, the main language is the Creole, and I don't have a problem with that. But the problem that I have is, if you're going to institute a bilingual system, then it must be the two languages that are equal importance. So how do you think that, well, given the situation in Jamaica where several English teachers have problems with the language, so they at times you teach in the language, how do you think we can avoid that situation so that we can be teaching a pure patois alongside a pure English?
About 3 different points. Point number 1, Haiti has always been monolingual in Haitian, except for 5% of the elite right throughout the history of Haiti. Right? So that's one. So the fact that Haiti declares that they may have a bilingual education system, the declaration of bilingual doesn't change the reality, which is that everybody in Haiti, the Constitution actually says that Haitian Creole is a language that unites all Haitians. It's the only language everybody knows. And some people know French. So the declaration of it being bilingual didn't cause Haitians to lose French. In fact, many more of them are no French. The other bit is, as you put it this way, you are using your phrasing, you said you're in favor of bilingual, but of course, we have to have English. Listen, for most of Jamaica's history, right, you have no English, right? There's an attempt, right, there are many more people who know English now than before, and hopefully, with a reform, many more will know English. But the point is, the justification for having the mother tongue in the education system is not to teach English, but to do all the things that mother tongue education does. Develop you cognitively, give you good self-confidence, learn the content subject of science and technology. It so happens that when you are bilingual or have a bilingual education system, you also learn the second language better. But that is not the reason for it. You know, we have to stop fixating on the fact that, oh God, we're dead if we don't get English, right? You know, hold on, we're dead if we don't have control of our own language and our own self. That's what we're getting.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Professor. I have a comment, observation, and then perhaps a question. I've developed a great appreciation of the importance of bilingual education. The notion of our students thinking in Creole is very prevalent. As a teacher of English myself, I have found over the years that our students are really thinking in Creole. So, for example, I may be trying to put across a concept in English, and I will get blank stares. And when I switch to Creole, they will look at me and say, "Then miss." So, as a practitioner in the system, thinking in Creole ideology, trust me, I have gotten a great appreciation. And so what I've tried to do is a kind of underground, if I may call it that, integration of Creole. And so, as a head of my department, I've instructed my teachers, right, to have sessions where you translate. So the feel away that would have been mentioned earlier, we compile lists of expressions that your students use. I learned about extrapolation in a course that I did. You take out expressions from their scripts, and I realized we would have been doing that before the course. You take out expressions from their scripts that show that the Creole has impacted how they write, and then you get them to understand that, hey, this is Creole, this is an alternate way of saying what you are thinking in Creole. Because there are times where they have an idea of what they want to say, but trying to express it effectively in English is something that often hinders them. And so I find that as educators, we have a responsibility to meet our students where they are linguistically. And so that is what progressively, and I've seen where it has gotten good results. Something that happened recently, the mindset, and it's something that is entrenched, because even teachers, this whole notion of bilingual education, they don't buy into it. So you have teachers of English who will explicitly say to you, no, I'm not for that. So there's this mindset that we have to somehow take a pickaxe and try to break away, right? Because it is something that is really entrenched. Notions also that I've come across is that we don't speak Creole. Only Asians speak. They're the only ones who speak Creole. We don't speak Creole. We speak a broken English, right? And so I think that as a country, we have to kind of re-socialize concepts and perceptions. And progressively, if we're able, from the baby stage up, kind of change how people, perceive ideas and so on. Over time, as a country,
we will be more appreciative of our Jamaican language.
Very fast comment, thank God they're thinking. Yeah. You understand? So you say they think in, you said they think in Creole. But the point is that you wouldn't go to England and say, oh, they think in English. So the key thing for us is to understand, is because we're still thinking that thinking is about thinking in English. Right? And so the key thing is, thank God they're thinking. And naturally they will think in the language that they're accustomed to thinking in, which is the English language. Is right? And then once you're doing that, then you can transfer it to other languages. And generally I agree with you with this one, but just a little point about what says the first thing last people will want them to do is think. Right? Cool.
Alright, well, we are going to finish here. Thank you very much. Let's give Professor very good audience, really great questions. We're going to have the coffee break, and then the next session, I guess they will tell us the next session perhaps will be
10 minutes.